Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Worx WX696L 20-volt oscillating multi-tool. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first up we have the battery slot located at the rear of the tool. It will accept any of Worx's 20-volt batteries, and overall it's perfectly adequate. There is a little play and a little bit of wiggling, but there isn't so much that you really need to worry about anything. And quite frankly, it's pretty standard for this sort of tool. Overall, I'm perfectly satisfied with the battery slot, and I think it gets a pass. So let's go ahead and move on. And next up, we have the speed selection dial. The speed selection dial is located near the base of the tool, and it features 6 different markings to indicate 6 different, spots on the dial. In reality, however, there's actually 11 different positions because there's basically half positions in between each marking. So you do have quite a variety of different options when it comes to the speed on this particular tool. Overall, the dial itself is made out of plastic and is very easy to turn, but it's not so easy to turn that it might get turned accidentally or unintentionally or from the vibration of the tool. Overall, I'm fairly happy with the overall design. The placement could be a little bit better. I personally prefer having the dial closer to the front, but it's not in an absolutely horrible position, just because, I haven't had any issues with bumping it or anything. The other thing I would probably change on this particular dial is maybe adding an indication on the base of the tool where the current dial is set at. Since there's no arrow, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to guess what speed you're actually operating at. But other than that, this dial seems to work just fine, and it's easy to turn, and I don't really have any major complaints. So yeah, with that being said, let's move on. Okay, next up we have the grip. The grip on this particular tool actually is a very comfortable grip. I have smaller to medium-sized hands, and my hands fit perfectly, so I think as long as you don't have extra large-sized hands, you'll probably be very comfortable with this particular tool. Now, overall, the grip itself is comprised of a rubberized textured surface at the top of the tool, and then there is basically bare plastic, and then there is another rubberized surface at the bottom of the tool. And overall, it's a very comfortable rubberized texture they decided to go with. The rubberized texture itself is a little bit harder than what you typically find on a Ryobi tool, but not that much harder. And overall, I think it's going to hold up a little bit longer than, say, the rubber that Ryobi uses. Also, the rubberized texture that they decided to imprint on the rubberized surface is definitely comfortable as well, and definitely helps you grip the tool. There's also a rubberized section near the front of the tool to help protect whatever work surface you're currently working on from the occasional bump or scrape that will probably occur with a multi-tool. So when all is said and done, the grip passes with flying colors. And next up we have the on-off switch. The on-off switch is located near the middle of the tool on the top and is made out of plastic. There is a tall ridge in the middle with 2 smaller ridges on either side, and it is quite easy to operate or turn on and off. So there really is nothing wrong with it, and quite frankly, it gets a pass from me. Although I personally prefer triggers over the on-off switch, but that's just a personal preference. And this tool is still completely usable for pretty much any job I need a oscillating multi-tool for. So with that being said, let's move on. And next up we have the most misleading feature on this particular tool, and that would be the quick release wrench for changing the blade. That's right, it's a wrench. It's not a lever. This is not a quick change lever tool. It's a tool that requires a wrench in order to change the blade, which is not what I was expecting when I pulled it out of the box. Now, to be fair, I didn't actually intend on buying this particular tool. It was a part of a kit, and the kit was a really good price, and so that's how I ended up with this particular tool. And I'm sure if I had done my research ahead of time, I would have known that this was going to be a wrench instead of a lever. But no, this is definitely a wrench and not a lever, even though the appearance would suggest otherwise. At the end of the day, it's perfectly satisfactory. It actually works really well, and I don't really have any complaints, and it stays in place, and it's nice to have the tool stored on board. I'm just saying that Worx, you don't think you could have stored that wrench somewhere else on this particular tool? Because quite frankly, your marketing here is a little bit on the misleading side, which I have a feeling was probably on purpose. And I actually kind of admire you for, deciding to go with something this misleading. So at the end of the day, it gets the job done. I'm glad the wrench is stored on board the tool. But I'm still going to ding you a little bit just for the misleading design here. But like I said before, I still kind of admire you for it. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the LED light. The LED is located at the very front of the tool and is in a normal position. I will say it's definitely going to be on the weak side. I personally would have preferred it to be a little bit stronger. But at least there is a light, even if it isn't providing much. It is going to be useful in certain tight quarters, but at the end of the day, it definitely is lacking in the illumination department. So this is an area of the tool that could be improved. but at least it does have a light. And last but not least, we have the blade clamp, or the blade holding area, or the blade securement area, or the thingy that holds the bladey on, whatever you want to call it. Quite frankly, this is a fairly standard area of the tool. There really is nothing special, and there really are no, well, interesting features here. On some multi-tools I've used, there's a magnet in order to keep the blade in place until you have it secured. On other tools you have the quick release system, which I personally really like having. And then, well, on this particular tool, it's just as basic as it comes. There really is nothing special, and it's pretty run-of-the-mill. It is a fairly universal system, and I haven't run into any blades that won't work on this particular multi-tool. But then again, I don't have a lot of specialty blades, so I can't really comment on things that are a little bit more unique. But for all my basic, you know, Amazon or random online seller blades I picked up, this works fairly decently with all of them. So at the end of the day, it gets a pass from me. Without a battery, but with a blade, it weighs 939 grams, which is around 2 pounds. And with a 2 amp hour battery, it weighs 1,330 grams, which is almost 3 pounds. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this tool in use. Overall, I've been fairly happy with this tool in use. I've used it for several different projects for several different purposes. I've used it for trimming down 18 gauge nails or removing 18 gauge nails, and it's done a good job in that regard. And I've been using it for trimming wood off of another project, and well, quite frankly, it did a good job there too, as long as it was paired with a nice wood removing blade. So quite frankly, I've been perfectly satisfied with its performance on both the scenarios I've used it in. And quite frankly, I don't really think that there's anything that the Ryobi's most expensive brushless model will be able to do better than this particular tool, well, except for maybe having the quick change blade, but at the end of the day, that really isn't the whole purpose of this particular tool. And I have to say, I actually feel like this particular tool is a little bit more powerful when it comes to the vibrations that it's able to produce for, well, cutting through material. And I think it's been doing a fantastic job at that. I will say the one area of the tool that I probably would say could use some improvement would just be the overall vibration dampening. There really isn't much. So I would recommend wearing a nice pair of work gloves when operating this tool. The battery life is actually fairly good considering that it's using a brushed motor, but then again, at the end of the day, I really would prefer it to be brushless just for, well, you know, the longer motor life and the better battery life as well. So quite frankly, that is an area of the tool that could use improvement, but considering the price point, I think it's an okay exception to have a brushed motor. I don't use multi-tools a whole lot, but when I do, I really do appreciate having a good, strong one, and I have to say that I think this one's probably the strongest one that I've owned. I think it's definitely stronger than the Ryobi's that I've owned, and the Makita, well, I don't actually own that one anymore because I just really hated it. So, quite frankly, this is kind of my go-to now, even though I do own the more expensive Ryobi brushless oscillating multi-tool. I just like the way this one feels a little bit better. So at the end of the day, I really do like this particular oscillating tool from Worx, and I don't really have any major complaints about it. So let's go ahead and move on to the pros and cons. And first up, 20 volt. 20 volt means that you'll be able to use your Worx 20 volt power share batteries, and if you so choose to, you can adapt batteries over from other brands using third-party adapters. Just remember that if you do go that route, you do so at your own risk. Nice grip. Overall, I am a huge fan of the grip on this particular tool. I think it's very comfortable, and it definitely makes using the tool much more enjoyable. And I'm just very appreciative after owning that horrible Makita and its nasty grip. So quite frankly, I'm very happy with this particular tool's grip. Universal fit system. Overall, the blade system on this particular tool can accept blades from most manufacturers, and this means replacing the blades is super easy, and you won't have to look around for a specialty blade for your tool. And this is a pro in my opinion. Onboard wrench. Yeah, there's a caveat here, but we'll cover that here in a second. I really do enjoy having the wrench stored on board the tool, and this definitely makes changing the blade easier, although not as easy as it could be. I am appreciative that the wrench is stored on board the tool, so this is a pro in my opinion. Well built. Overall, the build quality on this particular tool is very nice. It definitely feels better built than Ryobi's multi-tools, and it just feels like a higher quality tool. I don't know if that will necessarily translate into a longer life of the tool, but it definitely feels more premium. Rubber front. Overall, having the rubber front is a very nice feature and will help protect your surfaces when you're working in a tight environment. So this is a pro in my opinion. And the first meh is not a quick blade change. This definitely would have benefited from having a quick change blade lever, and I really thought it did because I didn't do any research on this tool before buying it. So the fact that it's actually a wrench is a little bit disappointing. Not so much to end up on the cons list, but it's definitely a meh. And the next meh would be the price. The price is around $70, which isn't horrible, but it's definitely not as good as it could be. Considering that this does not have a quick change blade system and it's using a brush motor, I think the price should probably be a little bit lower, but the build quality is fantastic. So at the end of the day, it's not really a pro, it's not really a con, it's just kind of meh. Weak LED. The weak LED is definitely a little bit of a downside on this particular tool. It's not a huge one, and I am glad that at least they included an LED light, but at the end of the day, they definitely could improve this dramatically. Lots of vibrations. Overall, this particular tool can generate quite a bit of power, which is a good thing for cutting through objects, not a good thing for, well, holding onto the multi-tool. So when operating this particular multi-tool at the higher settings, I would highly recommend wearing a nice pair of thick work gloves. And just remember to pack them if you are working remotely. And that's it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular tool. Overall, I'm actually very happy with this particular tool, and there aren't really very many downsides that can't be negated by either carrying a work light or wearing work gloves. So at the end of the day, I really do recommend this particular tool, especially if you're in the work system and you don't want to adapt batteries. I think it provides a lot of power, and I actually think it's probably the most powerful multi-tool that I've owned, and I think it does a fantastic job for, well, just about any project that I've thrown it at. Well, not thrown, literally. You get the point. It's been a fantastic tool, and I think it does a good job, and overall, I really do like having it. I am a little bit disappointed that it doesn't feature a quick blade change system, but at the end of the day, it still gets the job done, and it's actually kind of funny the way they trolled their customers with, well, the blade change wrench location and what it looked like. So I actually got a good chuckle out of that, so I'll give them a pass on that, simply because I enjoy being, well, amused. Just saying. So overall, this is a recommended tool, and if you are in the market for a multi-tool, or an oscillating multi-tool I should say, I'd say go ahead and pick this up. And that is it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.